Short of time, I do apologise to Lord Jordan. May I press on with Lady Prosser?
Thank you very much, Lord Chairman. Can we go back to third country access, which you touched on a little earlier? No doubt you're fully aware that the Commission is proposing to create a harmonised framework for granting access to the European markets to third country firms and market operators. Can you tell us a bit about how you would assess the Commission's proposals? I noted when you were talking about MiFID 2, you said you felt that this is, to you, Dr. Swinburne, you felt that MiFID 2 was not covering these issues adequately.
I think there are some real issues here with the text on third countries as it's dealt with under MiFID and MiFIR. It doesn't actually sit very well with what was already agreed under the level 1 text for EMIR. And that causes me great concern because the two have got to be exactly the same in terms of the output to this. And there's a real problem here. In EMIR, we certainly took away many of what we consider to be the barriers by taking away language concerning reciprocity. Because reciprocity is a very high hurdle indeed and is likely to be in contravention to WTO agreements, let alone anything else. So why they've put it in, we don't quite know. What I do know is that certainly many members of the Parliament have actually amended it to remove it and to improve the third country issues here. Strict equivalence and reciprocity effectively are going to close down our markets, which would be in nobody's interest to do so. And certainly when it comes to the derivatives component with a G20 commitment and the commodities trading with a G20 commitment, we want to be as close to other jurisdictions as possible. But the reality is that MiFID 2 has got a significant number of other issues that you wouldn't want to be standardised with the rest of the world. And so you wouldn't want any form of equivalence anyway. And so you have to have different regimes for different parts of the dossier. And I think certainly Markus Ferber, the rapporteur, has put an amendment in that actually recognises a transitional regime so that existing regimes within member states with other areas will continue to be in place for as long as necessary or until 1 year after the Commission has made an equivalence decision, either positively or negatively. So if the Commission doesn't get round to making an equivalence decision on, I don't know, Bolivia, then it would not actually stop the UK or any other member state from trading under existing arrangements with those parties. So it contrasts with what the Commission's text in there at the moment is, where they actually suggest a 2-year cut-off date from the date of adoption, which would then suggest that it would be a very detrimental effect if we hadn't got through all of those countries in that time. Oh. And certainly I've put an amendment in which is complementary to that, which suggests that we have to start working on the most important jurisdictions first. Yeah. So instead of going for the easy wins, the Commission needs to look at the biggest jurisdictions that we trade the most with first, so that we have those agreements in place with the US, with the big Asian markets, with the big players first, before we actually go for what I consider to be more of the easier wins. And under credit rating agencies, they went for the easy ones first. They went for Russia and China because they knew they weren't going to be equivalent, and that was an easy decision to make. They still haven't done the US and have got an extension to do that. No. I want them to go for the most important first.
Mr. Philippa, have you got anything to add to Dr. Swinburne there? Otherwise, I'll invite Lady Prosser to move on.
The short answer is no.
The Chairman welcomes that, I'm sure. Moving on to ESMA, can you tell us a bit about your view of the Commission's proposals to strengthen the role of ESMA? Where does the appropriate balance lie between the responsibility of ESMA and national regulators? Dr. Swinburne, you've stated that much is left to ESMA in how it writes technical standards, etc., talking about definitions of liquidity and market model and where they choose to set waiver levels. Do you think that such details should be added to Level 1 regulations?
Well, I think talking to me as a British Conservative MEP, you'll probably get a very different answer as to what I perceive the role of ESMA to be, rather than maybe some of my other colleagues who are a little more enamoured by the prospect of a single entity overseeing. I do believe that the value in ESMA really is in creating a common rule book for the financial services regulation as a whole. One of the real problems with MiFID I was the fact it wasn't in different interpretations in different jurisdictions. ESMA will ensure that there is one interpretation and will ensure that the rule book is enforced across the entire 27. That's positive. They will be writing the rules. They'll be writing the technical standards that are given to them under the delegated acts. And I have to say, I think we have some safeguards in here. Level 1 is where we need to specify the detail for them. Under Articles 290, 291 of the EU treaties, the role of the Commission is that it's allowed to delegate out under certain circumstances under delegated acts and implementing measures. So ESMA cannot make political decisions or have any discretion, and those powers that are delegated have got very definite time periods to them. So ESMA's role is very restricted and very tightly controlled. And when we set up these three supervisory authorities, there were some very tight rules that they had to. So in practical terms, it does dictate the balance between level 1 and level 2, as we've alluded to already. And level 1 shouldn't just indicate, therefore, that waivers should be applied to pre-trade transparency. We would need in level 1 to set the conditions for that waiver to assess, so market size, volume, or liquidity, or a combination of all three. So we would have to set that in level 1. And it's the balance that's important.
Could I invite Monsieur Philippot now to respond to Baroness
Yes, because
Prosecutor?
as we understand it, you're pretty much in favour of new powers being granted.
Yeah, we feel, I mean, just to give a little bit of perspective, we feel that obviously there is, and it's not our mission, but there's a political debate behind, which is about single market and about financial integration. If the EU believes that there's a need for a single market and that financial integration is a valid purpose, then regardless of, I was going to say everything else, you need a supervisor that has the mission of overlooking over the different markets and make sure they get integrated. We are all very conscious that our leaders don't always address the fundamental political issues and that the debates are very complicated, and certainly not going into this debate now. And this is the foundation. But if we say that we want a single market, you need an authority that will coordinate between markets in cooperation with national supervisors that by definition are closer to the ground, know the specificities of the local market much better, but that needs to be coordinated at a, I was going to say global level, not global, European level, EU level. Here again, highly conscious of all the political issues behind that, and of course the human issues and the issues of human resources and financial resources and power struggles between people. C'est la vie, exists everywhere, but if we're here to define sort of the ideal framework, if we believe we want a single market, we need a regulator that will coordinate everything. Here again, quite possible to say, oh, by the way, we don't want a single market, but that's another debate I'm not getting into.
Let's